welcome my dear colleague and brother, Ken Sharpe, and my dear colleague too, Ken Sharpe and wife. Welcome, ma'am. And also my dear brother all the way from Cape Town, Dr. Michael Louis. We can't wait to hear from you tomorrow. I do not want to labor to go through the profile of Ken Sharpe, lest I risk saying the wrong things. But Ken Sharpe is a prolific businessman. We know him as the founder of Westprop in Zimbabwe, and which is a proper portfolio company that is doing wonders. And I think the most spoken project at the moment is the use. So I think we'll also get an opportunity tonight to hear about the use. And another famous one called Pokugara in the affluent suburbs north of Harare. Ken, thank you very much for finding time to be with us. Ken today will basically set the broader tone of our inaugural Wealth and Retirement Summit as he speaks of a multipolar world. I think some may prefer to call it a VUCA world. Some now call it a VUCAT world. But how do we make the best value in that particular kind of environment? Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kipson. Thank you, CEO, Network Africa. It's good to be at the round table. And I see we don't have round tables, they're square. So I'm assuming that we are not all equal, because although they're equal sides of the table, I think a round table makes it fairer, because you don't know really who's at the head of the table, or you can't say one side is more important than the other, because everyone around the table is equal. So maybe next time let's have round tables. But I think it's important for us to gather at the round table and deliberate, because my wisdom as an individual is never as powerful as our wisdom as a collective. And I really believe that sincerely. I believe in collaboration. I believe that to build a country with 1 billion bricks, it does not just require the actions of one individual, one company, but it actually requires everyone's contribution and everyone's effort and commitment to build Zimbabwe. And I believe that together we can make a difference in Zimbabwe. So let me start off by talking about today's theme. I was asked to talk at this Wealth and Retirement Summit. And the theme today is generational wealth transformed. I like that, the last word, transformed. Because transformational wealth, or wealth generation that is transformational, would be normally the term that's used. But when I read generational wealth transformed, it puts it into the future tense for me. And I'm a futuristic man. I often say that I'm not living today in 2025, in this early part of April, and I'm not living in 2026 or even 2030. I know a country has a vision to 2030, which is great, but I live much further than that, because our own vision at Westprop is 2050. 1 billion bricks in the ground by 2050. And when we live and breathe something that is much further afield than perhaps even our own lifetime, and when we think of wealth creation, it's important for us to create wealth for ourselves. But honestly speaking, can any of us take that wealth with us to the grave? You know, you would all agree with me that that's an impossibility. There's a joke about that, I may tell you later, about a Jewish gentleman who tried to take his wealth to the grave. And there was a long debate and discussion about it. We'll come back to that story. But you know, because we don't take our wealth with us, we have to do something during our lifetime that ensures the transformation, that wealth becomes transformed. And once the wealth is transformed, it passes to the next generation. Which leads me into the topic, hopefully tomorrow, our chairman will give you a wonderful discussion. And I know in his discussion, hopefully he will mention biblical transformational wealth. Because it's a promise that God made from the beginning of time. That if we honor Him and we pay our first fruits, which is our tithing, He will give us more than we need. He will fill our storehouses so they will overflow. You see, in my own life, I've realized that God blessed me a lot. I'm a wealthy man. But He only blessed me to be a blessing to others. It doesn't make sense if God just blesses you for yourself. Because God is not a selfish God. He wants us all to benefit. We are all His children. So His very purpose, you could say, is to provide a blessing to us, to be a blessing to others. And whether you decide to bless others in your family, or you bless others in your further social reach, or you bless others in society with philanthropy, that's a personal choice. But I do believe that where much is given, much is required. And God blesses you to be able to bless others. I also believe in the Abrahamic covenant, when Abraham was promised that his seed would be more than the sand of the seashore. If we think of all the grains of sand in the world, there must be trillions upon trillions of grains. And that promise continues today. So Jewish people, where the Abrahamic covenant came from, have a tradition of keeping the wealth in the family. They're very good at it. In fact, they give the inheritance to the oldest son. And I think there's an example for all cultures to learn from them to say, and I'm not Jewish, by the way, so I'm not promoting the Jewish culture. But I think it's important for us to recognize that the wealth of today's generation gets multiplied by tomorrow's generation if it is taken care of. So I think when we talk about wealth creation, about retirement, we should be really talking about what are we doing for our children? What are we teaching our children? What are we teaching our children's children? Because if we teach them the right value system and the right moral code and the right formula of wealth creation, then what we do today as one generation will be multiplied tomorrow by the next generation. And I'm talking about multiplication, not 1 plus 1. So if you have $1,000 or $100,000 or $1 million today, and the next generation adds in equal value to it, it could become $2 million. But I'm saying a multiplication by 10x or 100x. We know the biblical example of the faithful steward, where the Lord left to each one an equal amount. And when he came back, the one had multiplied it into 10. And what did he do to that one? He rewarded him with 10 more, or actually the most that was given to the 3. The one who had multiplied it by 5 was also rewarded, but the one that buried it and kept the 1 was told that he was an unfaithful servant and actually thrown out and said, I don't want to see you again. And the one that he had was taken from him and given to the one with 10. Because I believe God has invested into us our full potential to use for His purpose and multiply that which He's given us whilst we are here. And when we don't do that, we may end up like the unfaithful servant and be thrown out. So I think that's a lesson that's valuable to pass on to our children and our children's children, because when we do that, then surely wealth becomes transformed into the next generation. And this is one of the reasons why we listed Westprop on the VFX. It's one of the reasons why I felt strongly that we should create the first land leasing company in Zimbabwe. And Pomona City 2.0, by the way, Pomona City is going well. Phase 1 is almost sold out, 700 stands. We have about 50 stands left. We're completing the final section of the main boulevard, which is the largest road in a development in Harare. In fact, anywhere in Zimbabwe, it's 6 lanes, 3 lanes in, 3 lanes out. And the first section of the road is 700 meters long. And that's the main entrance into the city. It continues in phase 2 much longer. And that road will be completed in June. We'll have compliance. People will start building houses on phase B and C. They started on already A. And we'll have 700 homes being built there. A value of $300-400 million being created in phase 1. Permanent value that stays in the ground. We decided that that was the last phase of land we were selling, which occupies about 100 hectares. The remaining 160 hectares is in a leasehold form that the company, the listed company, will continue to own in perpetuality, and allow the transfer of property built on the leased land to be sold to by the buyer and seller to anyone as a free title, but the lease title would remain in our name. So the leasehold could be as little as $30 a month on an apartment. Therefore, the cost of that land is taken out of the equation of selling the apartment, and the apartment becomes more affordable. And the owner who owns the apartment and wants to sell it one day can transfer that flat without transferring the land underneath. It's a system used in many countries around the world. We were the first in Zimbabwe to come up with it. And the reason for that is the very reason that I've told you, that we want to have wealth transformed into the next generation. So the legacy I would like to leave behind in our business is that not only did we put 1 billion bricks in the ground by 2050, not only did we drive the real estate sector as the leader in today's economy in Zimbabwe, but also we created an opportunity for the next generation to take care as stewards of that which we left behind and do better than we've done. When I think about the topic I was given tonight, which is vying for value in a multipolar world, I thought deeply about it. And the first part, vying for value, I'll start talking more about what we are doing at Westprop. Because surely we exist in a highly competitive environment. Even in Zimbabwe today, we led the way a decade ago when we started this, we embarked on this journey of transforming the real estate sector in Harare. And I believe we've been a catalyst of change, of rapid development that you now see happening in Harare. Because 7 years ago, there were very few people that were willing to put their money into the ground and take a risk and build things that they were not sure if the market would respond positively to. We took that bold decision, and today we've sold 1,300 properties. We took that bold decision, and today we've just completed 30 homes in Pokogara in Q1 of this year. And this month of April, we're finishing 18 more houses. That means every 2 days we're finishing off a house, which is a record for us. We're building Block 4 at Millennium Heights, which is an apartment building. It looks something like this one behind me, 4 floors. 4 floors was Block 3 that we completed. We're now building 6 floors in Block 4. And we're at the 3rd floor going on to the 4th floor now in April. And the team has been able to achieve over the last 2 months 1 floor per month of construction. So it means the 6th floor will be completed by June. The next building that we're putting up is the one behind me, which is Block 5. It's the first apart hotel in Zimbabwe. I cannot yet release the final details. It will become public next week. It's an approved REIT. We got approval from the Securities Exchange of Zimbabwe. It's the first apart hotel with an international brand coming to Zimbabwe. They're not yet in Zimbabwe. That allows people to buy into that development for $500 for a unit share. And then that gives them a share of the rentals from the whole building, which we believe will be double digit. We guaranteed 8% a year in US dollars on it. And we're hoping between 12 and 18% return on that investment. And it will be the first time that there will be a way of owning a fraction of an entire hotel at the entry point of $500. It also puts another 148 units into Millennium. We're also selling Block 6 now. And this year we believe we'll have 3 buildings under construction at the same site. That brings the total number of about 500 flats in Millennium Heights. We have 500 more in the plan. We approved to do 1,000 flats in that development. And that creates 120 million US dollars of real estate. So when we talk of vying for this limited market share and vying for value, what value do we represent? The value we represent is not only the growth in capital. So to give you an idea, on Block 1, people were buying studios at $30,000. Today, they're $70,000. Those people who bought at $30,000, we know individuals who rented them out on Airbnb who recovered their capital of the cost of the property in 1 year. So we are seeing the returns, the double-digit returns of people renting out these units and capital growth consistently. So that value that we're creating, we know over time will multiply by a number of X's. Already we've seen 2x, 2.5x in a period of less than 5 years on our existing site. So we're excited about the future because we really believe that what we're doing, we could see 10x. There's no reason why today our premium properties are selling at 2,000 US dollars a square meter. There's no reason today why we can't expect those properties to be 20,000 US dollars a square meter. Why do we have in Dubai properties selling at $100,000 a square meter, or Monaco and London at $200,000 a square meter, but we're still at 2,000? That's a 100x increase. Our country has more resources than the UK, but yet our properties are 100 times less. So I think when you think of value or store value, for me it's always been property. And then vying for value as a company, we don't just build a property that creates value for our customer, we give more than that. And that comes into the long-term vision of the future we have for the business, which is we believe in creating lifestyle communities. We don't just want to build a property and leave and go and build the next property. And that's partly why we're holding on to the land that we have. We see the real value in what we're doing in a product like the Hills, which is this one behind me. It's a retirement village. That's the flats in the Hills that we'll be building. Those retirement units, and they're limited, there's less than 100. If you think of Dandara, there's 500 retirement units. There's less than 100 in this estate, but it's ultra exclusive. It's ultra luxury. It's the first branded residences in sub-Saharan Africa, which means the hotel, the 5-star luxury hotel we're bringing to the Hills, will have branded residences attached to it. So if you're staying in the presidential villa or the penthouse apartment or one of the apartments on the 12th floor building, those will be linked to the hotel services. So if you want concierge, if you want room service, if you want laundry, those things are just a phone call away. This concept is very popular in the Western world. In sub-Saharan Africa, we're actually the first country to do it. Even South Africa does not have branded residences. So we have done many firsts in the Hills. One that I'm really excited about, we were there today, is the baobab trees. And talking about leaving a lasting legacy or wealth creation, what better way could you do it than in a tree that can grow to over 1,000 years old? And I'm sure you all know that I'm talking about the Zimbabwean baobab tree. So when I said to our designers of the golf course, which is the first USGA championship, so another first is we're bringing PGA. It's the second one in Africa. There's one in South Africa, Fan Court in George. This will be the second course on the continent that's USGA championship, and we're spending $10 million US to bring it to those standards. We've made it longer. It's now over 7,000 yards. One of the features I said to the designer, and by the way, the designer is Peter, who golfers are out there. I'm sure you know Peter Makovich. He's just won #1 in the world for the best designer in the whole world, and he's an African. And he came to see us 7 years ago and said he wanted to leave his mark on a design. We gave him carte blanche. He designed this golf course. And when I said let's put baobab trees, they said it's not possible. In Harare they don't grow. It's not possible. Today we have a 20-ton, 8-meter high tree and a 12-meter high tree next to it in a forest of baobabs, where we have 1,000 baobab trees growing in our nursery. So we'll have the first baobab forest in a city on a golf course in the world. And those baobabs will stand the test of time. What we do or don't do in this generation, certainly the next generation will either benefit or lose from it. But in 1,000 years, those baobab trees will still be there. So moving on from West Property and the success we've had behind West Property, I believe that by us vying in that market space with our unique selling proposition and bringing to the market the lifestyle concept of a gated community where people can live, work, shop and play is really our competitive advantage. And we continue to lead on that. Others are following us. We've seen what they're doing in Highlands Park with the mall and the precinct they're now creating with mixed use. We welcome it. I love competition. It helps us to be sharper. It helps us to see where we are in reality with the market. It's a reality check. And more importantly, it helps us as a community to collaborate and build Zimbabwe together. We as a company cannot provide 1 million houses. Government on its own cannot provide 1 million houses. But we know in today's market there's 1 million houses needed. In fact, our entire vision to 2050 is only 20,000 houses. That's only 2% of today's market. So let me come back to what I wanted to say about this multipolar world. You know, I looked up the meaning of multipolar, and it's really a political term. And when we look at the world today with the politics, the geopolitics going around the world, Trump's administration, him being a disruptor himself, an unusual politician, we really see a multipolar situation where we have these huge global forces working almost against each other, vying for their space. We look at the Trump's position of becoming more internal and nationalist. Europe has taken the same approach now. The war with Ukraine and Russia, China, Korea, it goes on and on. These global political powers are really in a multipolar world. And how does this apply to us here in Zimbabwe? You know, I found a very interesting theory that was written by a Russian gentleman who was very rightist. He was in the extreme right. And he said the philosophy of a multipolar world is very simple. It assumes that we are all equal. The philosophy of a unipolar world, a world of hegemony, assumes that no, we are not equal. There are people who are better, and there's everybody else. The multipolar world differs from the American hegemony of the unipolar world in only one way, and that we believe we are equal. We are all the same. We are all human beings. We are all part of humanity. We are all Ubuntu. And I like what he said in his book, The Theory of a Multipolar World is a cheerful and optimistic view of a future in which humanity will reach its highest development. You know, if we think about that, it's an altruistic view, but think of Zimbabwe. What is the highest level of development we can achieve? We as Westprop can put $300 million into the market, which we're doing with the hills. We're bringing an exceptional product into an area that no one would expect. We're creating an urban oasis with a 5-meter high wall, 5 kilometers around the estate, of 8 kilometers of walking paths, with Millionaires Drive and Billionaires Boulevard. Only 6 billionaire homes. By the way, if anyone's got $3 million to buy a mansion, you can have almost a hectare of land and a mansion on a world-class golf course. They're there. But it's not about that. It's about what can we do as Zimbabweans to build our future together. What can you do as individuals in your generation to leave behind a lasting legacy, to create wealth that the next generation will take on and increase? We're told in business that the chances of survival beyond the 3rd generation is less than 10%. So family businesses typically don't carry on after the 3rd generation. And the reason is one thing only. In fact, my daughter went to business school in the US. She was at Stanford. She first went to London. She thought she wanted to be in international politics. And then she came to me and said, Dad, I can't stand the United Nations. I'll never make a difference. War is terrible. I'm going into business. I said, all right, we'll go. What are you going to do? I'm going to Stanford. She went there for a year, started a startup, a tech company, then came back and said, I'm going back to do a master's. And she went to USC, University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and did a degree in innovation and technology and entrepreneurship. But her favorite professor was the family business class professor. And we didn't plan this as a family. It's just God's providence, just his favor. This professor taught her everything that you need to know about being in a family business. And when she came back this Christmas, she gave me a book that she'd written, which was her thesis and her final exam, about our family and how we're going to last beyond the 3rd generation. And the reason why the businesses don't carry on beyond the 3rd generation is one thing only: planning. They don't have planning, they don't have communication with the next generation, they don't have ownership, they don't have involvement. So we're very pleased in our family. We now have a grandchild. I have my adopted son, who's a Zimbabwean, he has a son. And we now have our niece, who just had a child in Ukraine. Actually, they're about to leave Ukraine with their child. And this is now the 3rd generation in our family. So we're already thinking about this little guy. His name's Victor. And we're thinking about Victor. What will he do to take on this mantle that we leave behind, for him to be a responsible custodian, for him to take that asset that we've created and multiply it by 10x. So we have a $300 million company on the VFX. Before 2032, I would like to see it being $1 billion. And before I retire, I would like to see it being listed on 2 exchanges internationally and being $2 billion. But I'd like to say to the next generation, take that $2 billion and make it into 20. That would make me feel good. And I'm sure God would like to see that from them as well. That's my challenge to little Victor there. So no pressure on you, Victor, but you know, we have to take seriously what we've given. And then if I come back to the point of today, how do we look at wealth today and wealth creation? You know, if I was to ask any of you in this audience, do you know what the total debt, the global debt of the world is today? Would anyone give me the right answer? Just give it a try. Feel free to give it a shot. It is, by the way, in trillions, not billions. And to remind you, we're not talking of Zimbabwean dollar trillions. These are real US dollar trillions. So a trillion is $1,000 billion. 3 trillion, let's go up. You can multiply by 10.
250.
250 is a bit exaggerated. There are some numbers out there. But $100 trillion today is the total public debt. 100 trillion. So let's put that into this room now. How many of you are not employed formally who rely totally on an informal business? As I thought, not one. Not one. CEOs, kind of don't really rely on informal businesses. So we're all employed formally. If I was to ask you how many people in the world are formally employed, what would you say to me? By the way, there's 3.3 billion people in jobs in the world. Which is more than I thought. 3.3 billion people are actively employed. And thinking about our future, which I'll close with, our future demographics, which is very young, especially in this continent, you would expect there to be a lot less. So that means those 3.3 billion people are going to become a lot less before the next generation gets employed. But how many of that 3.3 do you think are formally employed? A number, guess.
40%.
Very good, that's exactly right. Well done. I think he knows it because he's NASA. He needs to know. This is where his money comes from, that 40%, right? That's the exact number, it's 40%. So 40% of 3.3, you deduct about 2, you're left with 1.3 billion. So call it a billion people, right? Let's just round it off. 1 billion people are formally employed in the world. If you divide the debt, the total debt of 100 trillion by 1 billion people, how much do you get per person? Some mathematicians in the room? You get $100,000. And if we go up to Gibson's example, there are estimates at 200, even 250. Probably it's 200,000. So between 100,000 and 200,000 US dollars, each one of you in this room owe today. That's what you're passing on to the next generation. And by the way, it's not getting any better. Because even if you leave this room with a check for $100,000 or $200,000 written to either the government of Zimbabwe or whichever government you decide to give it to, and if every one of the billion people do that tonight, we'll have no more debt. But the bad news is tomorrow the governments will keep spending and they'll borrow again. So how do we get out of this debt cycle? We're very fortunate in Zimbabwe actually, because our debt was written off thanks to Robert Mugabe because of hyperinflation. And the asset that we now have is debt free. It's very unusual to have that in a country. Our assets are almost totally unlevered. In fact, in Westprop, we have a $300 million balance sheet and we only have a $1 million loan. How does that happen? It's unheard of. So we've got these assets that are unleveraged. And if you think of our national assets, the resources in the ground, which is trillions of dollars, there's zero borrowing against them. And if you think of our greatest asset, I often say the greatest asset in Zimbabwe is not the minerals or the resources or the natural beauty we have, it's actually the people of Zimbabwe. Very few people are borrowed in Zimbabwe. Very few people are leveraged to an extent that they would be in the Western world. So it's sober-minding for me to think that we are passing on to the next generation hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And my encouragement to each one of us in this room and to Zimbabwe in general is don't get into debt. Because that will be our downfall. If we can remain debt-free and use our resources we have to gradually build our wealth and pass it on to the next generation debt-free, we will become number one in the world. We have the potential to go from being the last country on the list of countries to being the first. Not only because God said the last will be first, but because of our unique situation. So I believe that by passing on wealth, we need to do it in such a way that it doesn't burden the next generation with debt, that they remain debt-free. And lastly, my message to you is tonight, if we think about what our role is in our society today, and I look at myself and I say, what is my role? And I'll share a personal journey with you. When I was only 20 years old, our daughter had not been born. We just got married with this beautiful lady from Ukraine over there. I'd smuggled her out of the Soviet Union earlier in 1990 when it was not allowed. And I was driving a truck, a 5-ton truck, full of sweets and confectionery and groceries. I was a cross-border trader, and I was moving from Zimbabwe to Malawi because I had done business in Zimbabwe and I believed we could do business in Malawi. And my manager said, there's no money in Malawi, the people are poor, they can't buy sweets and chocolates. So I filled this truck up, maybe with $50,000 of product, and I drove. It was a refrigerated truck, so those things can melt in the heat. And I drove it. I spent 2 days at Nyamapanda, 2 days on the other border after Tet. Eventually got into Black. I'll do it afterwards during some networking about exactly this thing. Because when you have a property, you don't pay rent to someone. And I didn't want to pay rent. I don't like parting with the money in my pocket. In fact, I don't have $1 in my pocket. I know I don't have to part with anything because there's nothing to part with. So I said to her, we'll live in one house. We won't have to pay rent. We'll have another house as a place to go on holiday when we want to go on holiday. And then the other 3, we'll rent them out. So that when we get older and we want to retire, we won't have to look for money. Those people will just be paying us the rent. And she said, that's a good idea, go for it. Unfortunately, it didn't take me quite 5 years. It took about 8 or 9 years. And eventually I had to use bank debt. I leveraged some of the properties. The first one I bought with cash. And after 8 years, I had 5 properties. And within 3 years of that, I'd paid them all off. And I believe in owning properties without debt. I've followed the same formula all my life. And today I can honestly say that when we retire, I don't need to look for a pension. With all respect to old Mutual over there, I know, and NASA, I know I'm paying my dues, but I won't come looking because I don't really need it. I've got enough without it. And I think that was the wisdom of my youth that gave me the ability to see further than my 20s and 30s and 50s. I'm now 52. I would like to live to 120. So I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon. But I think we have to consider that we don't have the wisdom. The Bible says in James chapter 1 verse 5, if you lack wisdom, ask it of God, and He'll give it liberally. So we don't have wisdom as individuals. As I started off tonight, I said, my wisdom as an individual is limited. But our wisdom collectively is much greater. Let's come together and learn from each other. Let us understand each other's wisdom so that together we can be wiser. And my parting story is my wife said to me tonight I have to tell a joke, and I'm very bad at telling jokes. So I had 2 Shona jokes which I'm not going to tell. I will say them to anyone who wants to know them privately at the table, but I'll give you the English joke. And the first one is about a Ukrainian gentleman, and the 2 jokes is about 2 rich people, by the way. The one that didn't want to part with his money, and the one that allowed the other person to become very rich. And I'm going to give you both stories now. The first one is the one who didn't want to part with his money. In the communist years, there was no wealth, no private wealth. It was all belonging to the government. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was new novo-rich oligarchs that were created. Within a few years, in the mid-90s, this certain gentleman, let's call his name Dmitry, he had $100 million that he had made, US dollars. And he was told, take it to a Swiss bank because they're the safest bankers in the world. So he transferred his money to this particular bank, I won't name it, and he flew there to meet the manager. The manager gave him the red carpet treatment. But on the way from the airport to the bank, he told the driver, stop at the Rolls-Royce agency. Or maybe Rolls-Royce is the wrong brand. Let's use Mercedes. Mercedes-Benz S-Class he bought. He got up to the bank in his car. He went into the meeting. The manager rolled out the red carpet, big office, offered him everything. What can we do for you, Mr. Dima? You've given us this money. You're our most important customer. Anything you want, credit cards, personal services, personal manager, anything. He thought about it for a while and then he said, I think I want to borrow some money. The manager said, what? He said, I want to borrow some money. Does your bank lend money? He said, well, it's a very unusual request because normally private banking is people just accumulating wealth and investing it. But of course, if you need to borrow money, we'll lend you the money, no problem. How much do you want to borrow? He said, let me start with $1,000. He said, what? $1,000. He said, there's a difficulty. We don't lend less than $10,000. He said, okay, I'll take $10,000. He said, okay, but there's a problem. We need security. We need collateral for the $10,000. He said, well, how about my car? I just bought it. It's brand new. He said, yeah, I'm sure that's okay. Paperwork, yeah, the paperwork. So I gave him the paperwork keys. Off he went. A year later, he came back to the bank. The same story, right? At the end of the meeting, the manager says to him, Mr. Dima, I've been thinking the whole year about this loan. $10,000. He said, yes, I've come to pay it off. Here's the $10,000 and I owe you, I think the interest was 3%, so I owe you $300 interest. Here's the $300 interest. He said, thank you very much, Mr. Dima, but I want to understand, why did you borrow this money? I haven't worked it out. So Dima said to the bank manager, where else in Geneva can I park my car, for a whole year for $300. The second story is a slightly shorter one, but it's about a gentleman, and you may have heard this in many formats, of the banana. You've heard of the banana story, right? The guy who's poor but has bananas around him on this tropical island. He's on the beach. The tourist comes and he sees this man lying under the banana tree and says, "Why are you lazily lying under that tree? You could be picking those bananas and selling them on the market." So the traditional story goes that the tourist says, "If you do that, you'll become rich like me. And one day you'll be able to come on holiday and do what I'm doing." And the moral of that first joke was the person said, "But I'm already lying on the tree and enjoying myself." So this story is slightly different. The guy climbs up the tree, starts selling the bananas. After a month, he makes $20. After 6 months, he makes $1,000. After 2 years of selling bananas every day, he saves up $5,000. And then something happens. And a few years later, he is extremely wealthy, millionaire. And this very poor man comes up to him on the same beach and says to him, "Please tell me, I saw you a few years back lying under this banana tree with no money. How did you become so rich?" So he said to him, "You know, this is the story. The tourist came, told me to sell the banana trees. I did this. After so many years, I had $5,000. And then my wife's father died and left us millions of dollars." So in that story, I do have a daughter, and one day I will die. But please don't think it will work for you, because everything I own is in trusts and foundations. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, thank you.
Then they're going to ask questions.
Okay, sure.
All right. Please indulge us for a few minutes. We just
No
want to have
problem.
a quick Q&A with you. Do we have any questions, any comments
Back.
that we want to make?
So as we get that mic out to the
So
first
those who are
question,
this way, I think
in,
we need
in Ukraine there's a joke that there's no
I
free
need to ask you to
cheese
come this way.
except in a mousetrap. We say that there's no free lunches. So I guess this is one of those times when I still have to pay my dues. So sure, as many questions as you want, fire ahead. Fire away.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Sharpe, for that a very inspiring journey. But my question is, you are doing very well in Harare, it's Westprop, and if I listen to you very carefully, when are we likely to see you rolling out in these other lesser cities and towns?
Like Redcliffe or Kwekwe or where?
Something like that.
Yeah, you know, it's a very good question. In fact, we've had people from Kwekwe and Gweru and Mutare and Bulawayo and a few other places come to us and say, "We see what you're doing. You are a specialist at it. You can really deliver excellence. We trust you. We have this land. We own it. Either we inherited it or we bought it. It's got title deeds. We will give it to you. You don't have to pay for it. Do on it what you're doing in Harare and let us benefit from it." Great proposition. My answer is no, every single time. It's easier to say yes to things in life than it is to say no, but that's another lesson we should be teaching our children, is teach them how to say no. Because, you know, for me, it's about staying focused. I often say our strategy is aligned to the lioness. Because when she hunts, she chooses her prey very carefully. And when she selects one of those animals, she goes for it. But she doesn't take her eyes off it until she either kills it or loses it. So we at Westprop believe in the same thing. Our prey is the 2050 goal, 1 billion bricks. And we have enough land, believe it or not, today, to build those billion bricks. $5 billion of real estate value today is what we will create on our existing land bank. But by 2050, it's not 5 billion because of the formulation of value appreciation over time and inflation. It will be probably between 30 and 40, conservative estimates, 30 to 40 billion that we'll create on our existing land bank. And if we conservatively say we're going to make 20% profit, which is our margin today, we're a public company, it's not a secret, you can work out that 20% of 40 billion is 8 billion. Why would I want to go chase something else if I've got 8 billion coming to us? The second reason is more important. If we dilute our energy and overpromise and underdeliver, we will destroy the brand credibility that we have in today's market. We are trusted where people come to us and pay us in advance to buy a property before I have a building plan for it. In fact, before I even have a design. I've taken money for this building behind me. We've 60% sold, by the way, on this apart hotel. I've taken money from people before I was able to show them a picture of the building. We're selling Block 6. We've only just finalized the plans. We have people securing units on Block 6 with reservations. So how do we achieve that in today's market if we're not trusted? We have to keep our promise. Of course we make mistakes. Of course there are delays. But we will see it through to the end. And we'll do more than they expect. In Pomona City, we had the option in phase B and C, where we created 550 stands, in addition to the 150 in phase A. And phase A, by the way, we did chip and spray roads, which is the cheaper and faster way of doing roads. Less compaction, less layers. Today, I'm moving 50,000 cubic meters of gravels to one block of about 150 stands. 50,000 cubic meters. I've moved more than 200,000 cubic meters. That's 200 million kgs of weight just to put underneath the road. Because the road is not what's on top of it that counts, it's what's underneath it. So if I wanted to save money, I could save millions of dollars by not doing that. But what did I do in phase B and C? Instead of doing chip and spray, which was going to cost about $500,000, I decided to do asphalt. 30 millimeter thick bitumen asphalt, which cost us $2 million. The client didn't ask for it. It wasn't contractual, it wasn't an agreement saying we're going to do asphalt roads. But we went ahead and did that because we want to create lasting value and we want to over-deliver on our customers' promises. So we will remain focused. I'm not saying we'll never go out of Ferrari. No, I'm not. We will. The day will come when we will be able to cope with our demand and be comfortable with it, and then we'll expand.
All right, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, good one.
All right, I'm coming to you.
Thank you. My question, Ken, is on the leasehold. How long is the leasehold and what happens when it expires?
Good question. So people feel fearful about the leasehold concept because it hasn't been done before. It's 50 years to answer your question, but it's renewable automatically. So it's a perpetual lease. And the rights of the lease are transferable to your inheritance, to your beneficiaries. So if something was to happen to you, we would transfer that lease to whoever you would want it to be transferred to. If you sell the property, you also have the right to transfer the lease with the sale of the property. So the only thing really is about the value equation. Whether you feel emotional about owning the land or not is a different question. But if you look at the value equation, it makes more sense financially not to own the land. Because land is an increasing value. We know in Harare now, it's not uncommon to buy a piece of land at, we've even seen a sale at $800,000 for 1,000 square meters. $800 a square meter. So we don't think, and that's commercial, so it's more retail land. But we don't think land value is going to get any less, which means over time, the cost of land will only go up. And therefore, if you can remove that cost from the equation, you gain in the purchase value of the property or the cost of the property.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ken, for the talk. I think for me, it's not a question, but rather it is a request that I'm putting forward to you. Maybe a request that you can finish off during networking. I would want to meet up with you, to sit down with you. So maybe something that we can discuss later on, because you spoke about wisdom, sharing wisdom and the like. So I would want to have that talk with you. I hope you won't say no.
I accept the invitation. Thank you, madam.
All right, we'll take a last one. Does anybody have anything? Okay. This will be the final one, and then we will continue.
I'm glad to see a younger generation in the room.
Yes, indeed.
And I'll just make the comment, the gentleman next to you, I can see profile-wise, this is Zimbabwe, because we all are old Madalas here, and Mboyas. You know, when we look at Zimbabwe, 62% of our population is under 25. This is the future that we need to be talking to. You know, this message of wealth, creation, of retirement, it probably suits us more at our current age group, but it's the next generation we need to be teaching it to. So thank you for raising a question, and thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, sir. First and foremost, thank you for the very insightful presentation. I was actually having conversation with one of my friends to say that I would be in the same room with Mr. Sharpe for the first time in my life. And he was like, look, you need to ask him a question in particular for the youth. So, Mr. Sharpe, this is a question for the youth. That is to say, what are 2 or 3 of the most important global changes that Zimbabwean businesses, especially those that the youths are involved in, that they should be aware of right now so as to stay competitive and create value in the future? It's a question.
That's a great question. It's very deep, you know. But I'll start with the first thing. I think Trump and his administration has changed permanently, in my view, global geopolitics. And the first thing that affects Zimbabwe is the aid. You know, US aid does not exist anymore. They thought it would be a temporary measure. It's permanently closed. It's gone. That was arguably maybe $200 million a year to this country. So how do you as the youth, look at a country that is technically still third world, we're a developing country, and we're in the global south, but how do you look at that in a way where you no longer rely on aid? There's no more handouts. My view is that it's probably the best thing that could happen to us, because it will teach you the discipline of not waiting for someone to give you something with your hand open. Go and seek it. You know, that's my first message. Go and earn it. Because definitely Zimbabwe is a growing economy, and we have services and products that are needed out there. They have not been found yet. And that leads me to the second lesson, which is today we live in a global environment of connectivity. You know, thanks to the internet, Starlink will have the whole world covered soon. Technology has become affordable. For $10 a month, you could be connected to anyone in the world. And I believe that the technology opportunity for Zimbabweans, especially the youth, is not being taken advantage of. You don't need to go to school. And that's one of the reasons why I started the SBA, the Sharpe Business Academy. I have 200 students now. I'm in the second cohort. We fully subscribed. And we teach Harvard Business School case studies to these young people who want to do entrepreneurship. And I don't believe that you need to have a formal education. I dropped out of school at O levels. But somehow I ended up getting a degree at Harvard Business School, which is nothing short of a miracle. But I didn't really need it because I was already a millionaire. So at the end of the day, I don't think you need formal, as much as your parents don't want to hear this, I don't think you need formal education in today's world. What you need is practical skills, and they're all available to you on the internet. If you have access to a phone as young as 5 years old, I believe at 10 years old, you'll be doing better business than I'm doing right now, if you start learning at 5. So the youth out there must apply themselves into that virtual world and learn from it, absorb everything it offers, and use those skills to develop products and services using technology that are not there today. Because the AI that we have in today's world is definitely better than most people think it's worth. It definitely helps us more than it can. It could destroy us, but today I think it helps us more than we can estimate. And I think with AI and the technology available, innovation and creation of software is something that we have the IP capital as young people in Zimbabwe to do. Why should we have apps being created in the Western world in Silicon Valley when we could be creating them here in Zimbabwe? So I love to see things like Old Mutual's doing and others, banks, Stanbic, they've got these innovation labs. There should be more stimulation, more incubation of those type of skills with our youth. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sharpe.
Thank you very much. Thank you.